It's important to sing the anthem often and rousingly. What we have these days are acknowledgements of country. I absolutely believe that we have to appropriately honour and respect the first Australians, the original inhabitants of this country. But this idea that every day should be started with something which more or less implies that the country was stolen from someone and atonement must be made generation after generation, well, it's not healthy. It divides us, it doesn't unite us.
The Australian way of life is under threat like never before. Sectarian violence is rife on our streets. The political class is silencing mainstream Australians under the guise of hate speech. And the media, universities and major civic organisations continue to fan the flames of division. Australia is without leadership and Australians are losing hope. 2026 will be the year that defines the future of our great nation. Are we up to the task? Hello, Tony, and g'day to all of our viewers and listeners. Great to be back. Today, Tony will be sharing his thoughts on his new role as President of the Federal Liberal Party, the fallout from the federal budget, Australians' thoughts on the national anthem and the future of the AUKUS deal. Tony, great to be back with you.
And thanks for having me, Dan. Really appreciate it.
All right, well, let's start with the big news, which is your accession to the role as President of the Federal Liberal Party. What does that actually, one of the questions I get a lot is, what does that actually involve, being the president of the party as opposed to, say, leader of the parliamentary wing of the party? What are you wanting to do with this role?
Well, first of all, the role, and second, what I might try to do with the role. The national president is not the national leader. The national leader is Angus Taylor, and he is the person who is running to be Prime Minister. The president of a political party is a bit less than the chairman of a board, and the leader of a political party is a bit more than a CEO. So my job as the president will not be to set policy. It won't be to address the nation. It will be to try to ensure that the Liberal Party organisation is in the best possible shape to make Angus the 32nd Prime Minister. And we haven't been in terrific shape organisationally. Our membership is too small, it's too old, it's too concentrated in leafy suburbs. Our candidate pool hasn't been big enough and strong enough. Our fundraising has relied too much on a few key people. So all of that's got to change. Given that this is probably the worst government in history, certainly the worst government in living memory, worse than Whitlam, what the Liberal and the National parties need to do is effectively to lead a people's revolt against a government which is almost un-Australian in its assault on aspiration, its assault on wealth creation, and frankly, its ambivalence about Australia. I mean, no Prime Minister who feels the need to stand in front of three flags, no Prime Minister who feels the need to acknowledge some of us more than all of us at the start of every speech is really fair dinkum about loving Australia as it is and respecting our Anglo-Celtic core culture, our Judeo-Christian fundamental ethos. And so it really is very important. I mean, just at a personal level, Dan, I guess just because you leave the parliament doesn't mean you aren't a crusader for a cause. But I thought that the Bondi massacre was a dreadful milestone in our national decline. And I was certainly very keen in the wake of the Bondi massacre to do more to help, and Angus Taylor was very keen for that to happen, and so I'm pleased to be in some way back in harness.
In your missive to Liberal Party members after your taking on the role, you mentioned the need to focus on the government and focus on Labor rather than perhaps focusing on One Nation and the challenge that they may pose to the future of the Liberal Party. Would that be your message to some of your colleagues in the Liberal Party to stay focused on Labor? Or how do you, I guess the broader question is, how do you view the dynamic with One Nation, Liberal and National at the present moment?
Well, in some sense, obviously there's a competition between different parties on the right, but what unites all of the parties of the right is an absolute passion to end the Albanese government because, as I said, it is a diabolically bad government. Now, occasionally it might be necessary to politely disagree with other parties and other leaders, but our focus absolutely has to be on getting rid of a bad Labor government, and that's where all our guns should be trained. And if we don't do that, well, the risk is that we'll give this terrible government a leave pass.
All right, well, let's talk about the continued fallout from the federal budget. We talked about this last time, and things have only gotten worse for the government. It's pretty clear that they're not going to be able to turn around public opinion on this issue. And I think what was really interesting was when the Treasury Secretary, so not a member of the government, but the head of the Treasury Department, a public servant, basically said, well, we've got to raise the money somehow. Now, that is true as far as it goes. Yes, you need money to run a government, but I think that what that sort of gave away was the rhetoric from the government was this is about intergenerational equity and home ownership, but really it's pretty apparent it's just a tax grab.
Completely correct. The government's spin is that the budget's all about making it easier for young people to buy a home. But the reality is it was a tax on rentals, it was a tax on investment, it was a tax on small business, and even a tax on death through these discretionary testamentary trusts. And it wasn't going to do what the government said it would because, as even the Treasury documents say, these changes, and they're putting the best possible spin on it, these changes will help 75,000 people into a home over a decade. 7,500 a year. I mean, this is a drop in the ocean. It's not an effective move to liberate Australians to have a home of their own. And then, of course, as you say, Dan, the Treasury Secretary admitted that it was basically just a grab for money. Well, the problem with the Albanese government is it just doesn't get economics. It just doesn't understand business because none of them have had real jobs. None of them have had real jobs. I mean, the only one who hasn't been a public sector employee, a party official or a union official, almost from adolescence, is a guy called Andrew Charlton. And he's remarkable simply because he's unique.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, as you mentioned, is the government's own figures show it's not going to do much. But I think the other point is, well, there are two major determinants of home ownership, demand
and supply.
And the demand is coming from mass migration, and the government's own budget says that there's going to be more migrants coming in than even what they told us on top of already record highs, and they're doing nothing to build more homes. I mean, you've got the National Housing Accord, which has achieved 0 out of 21 of its targets. So they're doing nothing on the main things whatsoever.
And their environmental obsessions and their tax grabs at every level are continuing to restrict supply. I mean, depending upon the state or territory, hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the cost of a home and land package is state, local and territory taxes, charges and rules. Now, this is one of the weird things about contemporary Australia. Not only do we have more abundant natural sources of energy than any other country, yet we have amongst the world's highest power prices. We have more land. We have more land than just about any other country on earth. And yet our land prices are up there with Hong Kong. It's just crazy. And this is why people are so jacked off with politics as usual, because they sense the absurdity of this. I mean, we are such a great country, we are such a good people, and yet we have been so let down by poor government, and it's getting so much worse under the current one.
And just on the migration issue, I mean, this is clearly one of the biggest issues facing our country now. And the government has absolutely no plan to bring the numbers down, and its only mechanism for achieving any kind of economic growth is through population growth. I think what the Australian community is after are pretty significant cuts for a very long time, so that our society and our economy can absorb the people who have come in. I think it has to be very strong and very clear, maybe even time for a pause with exceptions for skilled workers until everybody who wants to get in a house has a house.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment, provided, and I do think we have to be clear about this, there does have to be an exception for absolutely necessary skilled workers. If there is a specific job here in Australia that needs to be done, that can't readily be done by an Australian, but could be filled by a specific individual from overseas, well, I think we should let that person and any dependents come into the country. And it may be that if that all goes well and this person integrates well into the community, we love to have them as a citizen in 5 years' time. But there's got to be an absolute insistence that the numbers come down dramatically and that immigration at a collective and an individual level has got to be in Australia's national interests. And that's what plainly hasn't been happening. The gaping hole in our immigration system is so-called export education. So many of the people who come here as students are really looking for a work and residency outcome, not an educational one. Now, I don't blame them. Who wouldn't want to come to live in Australia, particularly if you're coming from what we used to call the third world? But we're wrong to allow this. We're wrong to effectively subcontract out immigration from the elected and accountable government to businesses, because that's what they are, most of them. They're businesses that are using residency as their cash cow, as their business model.
Hi, thanks for watching. Did you know that 3/4 of you watching this podcast aren't currently subscribed to the IPA's YouTube channel? So do us a favour, hit subscribe and you won't miss any of the action. While you're at it, head to ipa.org.au, follow the prompts to subscribe to the IPA's website, so that way you will find all of our research and analysis. Now back to the chat. All right, I wanted to chat to you about something that's not a day-to-day topic, but is an important one, which is Australia's national anthem. We undertook some polling, or we commissioned some polling on attitudes towards the national anthem to support some work that my colleague Morgan Beggar's done on the history and the importance of our national anthem. And it's in a series of work we've done on Australia Day, the flag and the anthem, to really sort of steelman the importance of our shared cultural symbols and songs. And what the survey found is that just over 3/4 of Australians want to keep the anthem as it is, and just over 3/4 think that the anthem is something that unites Australians. And this speaks to, I think, a yearning of a lot of people in our country for things that can connect us as a national community. We're more divided, I think, than at any time since World War II. And I'm just interested, I know you're an incorrigible monarchist, and I suspect that the 1977 plebiscite on the anthem, or national song as it actually was, you may have voted for God Save the Queen. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the national anthem and the importance of that song to our country.
Well, I agree with you, Dan, that it's important to sing the anthem often and rousingly. I also think it's good that we keep as the royal anthem, God Save the Queen, or God Save the King as it now is. And I certainly think that it's a unifying thing to do. I remember the days when you couldn't go to the movies without standing up for the anthem at the start of the show. This didn't happen in my school, but there are people of my generation who say that in most government schools, the school day started with a ceremony where you essentially said, I love my God, I serve my king, and I salute my flag. Now, I think that's wonderful. What we have these days are acknowledgements of country.
Yeah.
And I absolutely believe that we have to appropriately honour and respect the first Australians, the original inhabitants of this country. Our Indigenous heritage is one of the three pillars upon which modern Australia is based. But there's far more to modern Australia than just the Indigenous heritage. And this idea that every day should be started with something which more or less implies that the country was stolen from someone and atonement must be made generation after generation. Well, it's not healthy. It divides us. It doesn't unite us. And so I think the work that the IPA has done on the anthem is, like most of the work the IPA does, really important. And yeah, I hope that the powers that be in the state capitals and in Canberra say, yes, we need to do this more often. I mean, the Howard government had a program to ensure that every Australian school had a flagpole and a flag. I wouldn't be at all surprised if motions come up from branches in the next couple of years suggesting that it ought to be compulsory at the start of every day to raise the flag and to sing the national anthem.
Well, that's what they've done in the Northern Territory, at least regarding the anthem. Earlier this year, the government mandated that at all public schools, at least, that the anthem will be sung. I'm not sure if it was every day or may have been at assemblies, but nonetheless, a good policy.
A very good policy, a really, really good policy, and good on Leah Finogiara for putting it forward and being completely unapologetic about it.
The other question that we asked was basically, do you want to replace the performance of Welcome to Country ceremonies or acknowledgement of countries with the anthem before major events like at sporting events or at school assemblies? And 71% of Australians said that they did want to do that, which I think would be a very sensible thing. I think Welcome to Country ceremonies are no longer welcoming. They're very hostile, I think, and have become aggressive in the way that they're used. So, I mean, I think that's pretty sensible.
Yeah, look, I think in principle, unless you are at an Indigenous institution, at a remote settlement, or there is some special Indigenous dimension to the event, I think acknowledgements of country and welcomes to country are out of place. And yes, occasionally you get the delivery of a welcome to country, which is more of an accusation than a welcome. So I reckon that beginning the school day by raising the flag and singing the national anthem, that's a terrific thing to do, and let's hope it starts to become almost universal.
Sounds good to me. Let's go to the international front, some developments related to the AUKUS agreement. So as I understand it, the original agreement was that we would get one new and two second-hand Virginia-class subs from the US, and now that's sort of been downgraded, if you like, to 3 second-hand ones. The government's sort of saying this isn't a big deal. The Australian government's saying it's not a big deal. It'll save a bit of money, and it'll mean we actually get them. It sounds like something that would be a negative for the agreement from my perspective. Is this a suggestion that maybe the original terms of the agreement could not be met by the US? Is there anything to this, or is it just sort of not that big of a deal?
Look, I don't think it's a huge deal. It is a commentary on the difficulty that the Americans are having ramping up their submarine build. It's because they can't quickly expand production from about 1.5 subs a year to about 2.5 subs a year, which is what they'd need if they are going to give us new submarines as opposed to second-hand ones. My problem with all of this, and it's not with the AUKUS deal itself, it's with the fact that we are gravely undergunned at the moment. I mean, yes, AUKUS will give us a much more powerful submarine fleet in 2 decades' time, and I welcome the tripartite pact between the great English-speaking countries that AUKUS represents. But we need stronger armed forces now, because the challenge is now and in the next few years. And if we're going to get second-hand Virginia-class submarines in a decade or so, what about looking at getting second-hand LA-class submarines now? the Los Angeles class submarines are being retired all the time by the US Navy. Yes, they're perhaps 30 years old, but our Collins class submarines are sometimes 30 years old. They'll certainly be well over 30 years old by the time they're retired. If we can keep using the Collins class subs, what about using LA class subs? Because they're just a much more capable boat than the Collins class sub. They're nuclear. They've got a much heavier armament. They can stay submerged almost indefinitely. They're a vastly superior product. So what about getting them or looking at getting them now? This is ever since AUKUS has been announced. I've said, look, AUKUS is great, but the problem is now, not in 10 years' time. And I've been urging this upon people, and there is no obvious reason why it couldn't be done, except bureaucratic inertia and, I guess, the general view, which you see so often in defence, it's all too hard. Well, it shouldn't be too hard because, frankly, nothing's more important than the defence of the nation. And just at the moment, almost nothing is more urgent than the defence of the nation.
Do you get the feeling that the current government here is basically trying to wait out the Trump administration? Because Trump will be gone at around the same time of the next federal election, slightly before then, in all likelihood, unless there's an early election called. I've always had the feeling that they just sort of want to wait it out and sort of just let it go through to the keeper in a way. And they would probably be hoping a Democrat gets up next time around, and so they could work more closely with them. I would have thought was the mentality from the government.
I think the basic problem is that the current government seems allergic to any commitment of the armed forces to anything other than national disasters. I mean, I think it's embarrassing that we weren't involved, as we have previously been, with US military planning prior to the actions in the Persian Gulf. And if we weren't involved for, I suppose, reasons of the need for secrecy, well, once it became obvious that something was happening, we should have volunteered to be involved, because you can't expect an ally to help you when you're in trouble if you're not prepared to help them when they're in trouble. And you can't expect America to stand with us if we're not prepared to stand with the United States. So I think that our detachment, quasi-opposition to the whole Iran exercise has, well, it hasn't exactly strengthened the alliance, put it that way.
All right, Tony. Well, on that note, we'll leave it there. Thanks as always for your time and your insights, and we'll catch up again soon.
I look forward to that, Dan.
This is a production of the Centre for the Australian Way of Life at the Institute of Public Affairs. To find out more, visit australia.ipa.org.au.